You're good. Awesome. Evening, folks. We're going to have a good time today, but before we get started, I do want to say thank you to a few individuals and organizations. I'd like to say thank you to Ron Emery, my mentor, and Pat Moran for helping set this awesome technological studio up. I also want to say thank you to the Youngstown Foundation and the Youngstown SCORE. Westminster College and Eastern Gateway University are also a part of this, and I'm grateful for all of you folks. And without further ado, I think we can begin this evening. As you can see from this title screen, the topic that is at hand here tonight is thinking like a bee to serve your purpose. Now, some of the ideas that I'm going to be presenting here tonight are very specific and might hit you right in one of your pain points. And I ask you to please have the discipline of self-reflection to maybe incorporate that into your life. But we'll get into further details here down the line. Again, thank you folks for having me here tonight. My name is Trent Balduff, and I'm the founder of Tees Bees LLC and Have a Hive Incorporated. As we progress throughout the speech, we're going to get to learn a little bit more about me, but because the speech tonight is focused on entrepreneurship and sustainability, I'd like to talk a little bit more about what it is exactly that I do for sustainability as an entrepreneur. Is it working? I think so. One moment. Technical difficulties. Awesome. So the gentleman that you can see on the left in this photo is yourself, yours truly, T, the bee guy. Some people call me that. Mostly because I think they forget my name. They just call me the bee guy, but that's all right. You know, I'm okay with stereotypes because I am a bee guy. I do keep bees for a living, and I'm also a public speaker. So as you can imagine how excited I am to be here tonight to talk about these two things that I have chosen as my pathways. And I'm hoping that some of the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way and some of the mentality that I approach life with, you're able to take with you too, for your back pocket, for you to take home. As you can see here too, along with the photo of yours truly, kneeling next to a beehive, you can see the two logos for Tees Bees and Have a Hive. Both of these organizations were initially thought of in August of 2017, and I'm not sure, I cannot see you folks, but just act along with me. If you've ever seen a beehive in person, raise your hand. Again, I can't see anybody, so I hope everybody's hand is up. But if not, the biggest reason that I chose beekeeping as my entrepreneurial route is because the first time that I ever saw a beehive, I was absolutely taken aback and enthralled by that. If you've ever seen one, they kind of look so sleek and simple, almost like a dresser drawer, like you don't know if there's clothes in there. Should there be a lamp on top of this thing? But you open it up and there's 10,000 stinging insects in there. And it's just kind of a paradoxical view, and it's a very unique hobby in and of itself. It's a very unique hobby, and the people that are beekeepers, I get along with exquisitely because I'm a quirky guy. I was voted class clown out of my high school. I always like to crack a joke and have a smile on my face. So, and I feel that beekeeping and beekeepers, encourage both of those things. But essentially, Tees Bees LLC provides pollination services to urban or organic farms. I do not want my bees anywhere near pesticides or anything of that nature. I keep them in the healthiest, safest environment that I possibly can. And then Have a Hive is an organization in which individuals and organizations can sponsor beehives. And what's kind of cool about Have a Hive is that we are connecting, we're bridging the gap between people and nature through technology and bees. And to further clarify what's interesting about Have a Hive, at least to my peer groups, is that they've called it the Uber for beekeeping. Because when these sponsored beehives pop up, we work with a local beekeeper to maintain that colony. And like I said earlier, we're bridging the gap between people and nature through bees and technology because the beekeeper on the back end has an app, just like Uber. And they upload notes and photos about the beehive that they're maintaining. And then on the front end, the sponsor themselves gets to virtually interact with their beehive. And so far, it's been an amazing success. The few people who have gotten to actually beta test this technology with me were amazed and happy, and so thrilled that they got to connect with the bees on a deeper level other than just sponsoring a beehive. They actually got to see it grow. And one of the things that is exemplary of my entrepreneurial journey and my endeavors for sustainability could be expressed in the photo here of me kneeling next to this beehive. They say that a photo is worth about 1,000 words, and I want to say that this one here is about 1,000,000. But I'm going to do my best to sum it all up because I know we all have lives and we can't all just sit here and listen to me chit chat all night. But essentially, that beehive in that photo that I'm kneeling next to is at what is called a hive park. And a hive park is essentially an urban property, a sustainable green space that is owned and or managed by Have a Hive. And essentially, I am from Sandusky, Ohio. And this hive park, the opportunity for the hive park popped up in Cleveland, Ohio, which if any of you folks know the geography of Ohio, Sandusky and Cleveland are about an hour apart. No mind to the geographical distance. It still was something that I worked towards because of the fact that not only is it hosting urban agriculture, these hive parks host urban agriculture, but they also host youth education. And they assist in veteran services because Have a Hive has business partners that teach veterans how to farm as a means of mental rehabilitation and occupational development. And I feel myself getting down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but I do mean what I say when our initial goal of Have a Hive, our values of Have a Hive are bees. The goals of Have a Hive, the mission and values of Have a Hive are all centered around bees, literally and figuratively through this acronym here. Bees, be benevolent, environmentalists, encouraging, sustainability. Good catch, Trent. Appreciate you, Pat.
Nice. Yeah. There you go. Maybe move it a little bit closer too.
Will do. Crisis averted, folks.
There you go.
The values of Have a Hive are bees. Benevolent, environmentalists, encouraging sustainability. Have a Hive's hive parks are the epitome of bees. There are 5 different companies coming together to be able to provide the most wholesome experience possible for not only the community members, but the organizations and individuals that come to these hive parks as well. We're not only looking to educate community members, especially the youth, on how to grow their own food, how food grows, and how these foods incorporate themselves with insects in our own ecological atmosphere, but also the importance of each of them and how they, as individual children, soon to be adults, can have an impact on their community, their personal self, and their future by acting appropriately right now. It's not just a learning facility or a place to be a safe space where we get to, so to speak, babysit some of these community members. But we had a gaggle of children in the Slavic village of Cleveland, a group of 9 to 10 kids, all under the age of 10, that had almost little to no supervision whatsoever. But they came to the hive park every day that we saw that we were there because they knew that A, they were going to get something to eat. B, they weren't going to be bored and looking for something to do. Then they loved to learn and work. So it's a culmination of things that we not only wanted to provide, but we see a need for in society. And the relationship between Tease Bees and Have a Hive is that Tease Bees provides the pollination services and beekeeping equipment to the Have a Hive program, that is the sponsorship program. Now, aside from that, Tease Bees also, this is more specific to the entrepreneurship aspect of this speech, but Tease Bees LLC owns the intellectual property that is Have a Hive. So you see, Have a Hive is a trademark service that is recognized across the nation through the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Tees Bees LLC owns that intellectual property. And if you have not gone down the rabbit hole of intellectual property or LLCs and entities and things like that, it's very interesting. It really opens up a whole new perspective on the private business world, and it allows you to have a little bit more respect for the inventions that you see lying around you. Enough about me, enough about what I do. Let's talk about why I do it. Let's get down to the meat and bones of exactly why I chose beekeeping as a profession. Not only because I love bees and honey, I'm like Pooh Bear when it comes to that stuff, but I was immediately attracted to them for multiple reasons. The largest, the most prominent of those reasons is because of the fact that if you can have 10,000 stinging insects working together to achieve autonomy, that's remarkable. There is something to be learned about that. There is something to be replicated about that. And that sent me down a pathway of not only entrepreneurship, but self-enlightenment. And so, like I mentioned earlier, some of the tips and tricks and some of the things that I have learned about myself or the way that life works, and especially the way that nature works, I hope that these bits of information inspire you to not only continue to improve your life experience, but maybe even improve yours so much to the point that you can help somebody else's and theirs. Because I'm a big believer, I'm deeply spiritual. I'm a big believer in the fact that we are all walking each other home, and that no matter your race, religion, background, sexual orientation, or any of those things, we are all in this together. We are a hive. We are a colony, whether we realize it or not. And the more that we adapt a mentality of be me, be better, be the best version of me for not only myself, but my service to a higher power and my neighbors, the better off we would be. I could just wrap up the speech right there. No, I'm teasing. We got a lot to cover here. And I hope that that little bit just got you excited for what is to come, though. But on a real note, in the physical world, in nature, in life, if we don't have bees, if we don't have these incredible little insects, these powerful pollinators, we're done for. We're hurt bad if we do not have bees. And yet we continue to destroy our environment. Why? Why do we do this? Why do we do this to ourselves and to our environment externally to us? See, it's twofold. There are two types of healings for us to truly be able to make it out on the end of this better people. But it starts with respecting Mother Earth as it is. And that is, like I said, it's a twofold path. When you learn to respect Mother Earth, you respect yourself that much more, and vice versa. And it tends to build up together into the point where you just are loving of all things. But lo and behold, as you can see from the text, imagery, and information on this slide in particular, if we don't have bees, you're dead. We will all starve. And there is no ifs, ands, or booties about that. That's just how it is. But I want us to think of it in not only a physical way, where if we do not have bees and pollinators, that we will actually cease to exist as a human race. But I feel, me personally, that if we do not act like the bees, if we do not start to change the ways that we mimic our environment, if we don't start to do things more naturally, we are going to be without life internally, because there is a spark within each of us that gets us out of bed every morning. And the more that we apply ourselves to thinking or acting like a bee, the more apt we are going to be for success and more energetic we are going to be to serve. And we're going to cover more details on how that goes about. But here are more details about how life would be without bees, the actual bee themselves, not just the metaphysical mentality of the bee, but the actual physical insect themselves. As you can see from the screen, 1/4 of all wild bee species are endangered. Let that sink in. 1/4 of every wild bee species are endangered. It makes you wonder, what are we putting into their environment that is killing them off so slowly? What is it about their environment that we are either manipulating or not doing anything about to help them regain their populations? And I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's not only climate control, pesticide use, but there are some natural mites and diseases within these pollinators that they experience. But for the most part, I believe, I'm a big believer in a lot of research has shown, a lot of efforts, research has shown that has led to efforts in repopulating pollinator habitats, that it is something we are doing and have a say in, have control in. 1/4 of all wild bee species are endangered. So think about that next time you ever see a piece of litter on the ground, if you want to pick that up, or if you have the opportunity to carpool. It's the little things that do add up for us in the long run. Other interesting facts here on the screen are that over 90%, almost 100% of the 370,000 flowering plant species depend on insect pollination. We have almost 400,000 flowering plant species, and almost 100% of those require pollination services. Require it. They depend on that from the insects themselves. And I'm not talking just honeybees. There's bumblebees, hummingbirds, dragonflies, butterflies, you name it. Pollinators are not just bees. But the point of it is that it's dependent upon insect pollination. And if we're not doing things to not only preserve and sustain these pollinators, these insects that provide this pollination service to all of these flowers, we're going to end up living in a very gray world with not a lot of beauty in it. Then no sustainable beauty, at least. If we take our direction to this third point here, 35% of all crop production is made possible by bees. Now on this plate that is the graphic for this slide, you see oranges, plums, apples, avocados. You see nuts, you see celery, cucumbers, carrots, tomatoes, beets, snap peas, strawberries. None of those would be on that plate. You can essentially take the entire left side of that plate, all of the beauty, all of the color, all of the vibrant, alive foods that are on that plate are gone if we don't have pollinators. All of the things that, I'm not sure about you, but picking a strawberry in the middle of July, getting to pop that in my mouth, that's like one of those things that is, it's just a treasure on this earth. So many of those treasures of this earth, so many things that are so enjoyable, like fruits and vegetables. So at least to me, I don't know. All of the 3-year-olds that are watching this are not subscribing to what I'm saying here. But the point is 35% of all crop production, which correlates directly to a commonly heard saying, is that 1 in every 3 of your bites of food are because a pollinator did its job. That's immaculate. Imagine if you walked into a Kroger's or a Myers or a Walmart or any store and there was no produce section. I'm about to shed a tear thinking about that. But that's what life would look like without bees. In the physical world, I chose to be a beekeeper as an entrepreneur because I know that we not only need them to survive, that they're actually something we depend on immensely for honey, but also our food supply. And they're also quite economic. They generate over $500 billion to the global domestic or the GDP every year. That's a lot of hooch. With all that being said, I chose the entrepreneurial route as a beekeeper because I knew that we not only needed to preserve and sustain pollinator habitats and the overall education and awareness of what pollinators are facing, but I also wanted people to learn from these things, learn from their bees. Because despite all odds, all of the negative things, we are throwing pesticides at them. They are depleting in their population almost yearly. Just this past year was the first time that their population, that beekeepers suffered a net gain, or had a net gain in their populations. Maybe not a net gain. How do I word this? I'm sorry, folks. Give me a moment. Essentially, in 2011, a beekeeper could expect to lose anywhere from 35 to 70% of their total apiary, their total population. And now, fast forward to the numbers from 2019, a beekeeper is only likely to suffer a 30% loss. So there are better means of treatment for these mites and diseases that we see in the hive. There are more wise beekeepers that don't put all their hives next to a field that's about to get blasted with pesticides. But at the same time, there are still ecological degradation. There are climate change issues to worry about. There's nutritional availability for these hives, and some of them in urban settings. Essentially, no matter what us humans do to put them down, whether it be the pesticides, whether it be the irresponsible use of our land, they still bring their best to the table. Literally, the bee, if you've ever observed the inside of a beehive or watched one conduct its daily little business, they are impersonal. And that is a big word for what is to follow in these in the tail end of this speech, so to speak. But if a bee is always bringing its best to the table, if a little insect that can get squashed by your thumb is always doing its best, if it is always fulfilling its duty, so should you. It is up to you to be that person that not only does what they have to do, but does it happily. Or the other way around, does what they want to do because they get to. And I think that life is always both. You get to pick and choose sometimes. Some of that picking and choosing, you're going to be benefited by. You will have a benefit to the picking and choosing if you think like a bee in that process. Which leads me to my next slide. It is important to think like a bee. Here we are going to get into more of the personal sustainability and the more personal entrepreneurial route, because I believe that everybody is their own boss. You make decisions every single day that impact not only yourself, but those around you. You make decisions every single day. Every moment we are capable of making a decision that will shape our future. Everybody is an entrepreneur to some extent. Some people take full responsibility for it. Some people take half, some take none. My goal here today is to explain the process of thinking like a bee to you in such a way that you are prompted to take it that extra 5% of the way. Take another extra 10% of responsibility in your life, or whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be a feeling of I need to take on responsibility. Sometimes it's a feeling of I need to be more grateful. I could be more grateful. Or I'd like to start doing this as a means of service. But before we go down any of those routes, those possible pathways that we can walk, the number one question that you have to ask yourself is, who is the most important person in the entire world? Now, again, I can't see you folks, but please give me a hand up if you think it's your children. Heck, if I had kids, I'd probably say that. Give me a hand if you think it's your sister or your parents. Now, trick is, can we put 2 hands up if you said that you yourself are the most important person in the world? That's my answer. I feel as if I am the most important person in the world for humble reasons. And it's the classic saying, who is going to love you if you can't love yourself? Who's going to take care of you if you can't take care of yourself? It's phrases like that which provide me with some of the answers to who is the most important person in the world. But what does that question related to you have anything to do with thinking like a bee? You see, it has everything to do like thinking like a bee, with thinking like a bee. I am convinced personally, you will not be able to tell me otherwise, that every single bee believes that they're the most important person in the world. All of these insects think that they are the most important person in the world, the most important insect in the world, rather. Bees believe that they are the most important person in the world for a plethora of reasons. But again, the most pertinent of these is that that bee, that insect, is constantly working. And before I get too far into detail, I think the Women in Sustainability, Entrepreneurship and Sustainability at Westminster College might like this. There are 3 tiers to the hierarchy of a beehive. You have your queen bee, which is in charge of laying all of the eggs, up to 1,200 eggs a day, ladies. She's impressive. And you also have the drones. Now, the drones are the males in the colony. They are responsible for inseminating the queen and eating honey. And I don't know about you fellas, but that sounds like a pretty sweet life to me. Totally kidding. There's no meaning in that. Just lazy. But third, and most importantly, it's the worker bee. It's the female bees of the colony that do the most work, that do all the work, essentially. You see, worker bees are in charge of nursing the baby bees, cleaning the hive, foraging, feeding the queen, capping over the honey cells, restructuralizing all of the beeswax inside of the colony, inside of the hive itself. It's remarkable, all of the things that they're responsible for. And as that worker bee gets older, their roles change. And it seems as if instinct takes over. They go from a cleanup bee to a nurse bee, all the way down to a forager is how they end their life. Excuse me. And I'll be much more specific in when I say that bees, worker bees in particular, understand that they are the most important person in the world. So that when they are asked the question, well, Mrs. Worker Bee, who's the most important person in the world? She's going to say, I am. You know why? Because I serve not only the larger whole of what I'm a part of, but I make a living for myself in doing so. I put food in my belly when I'm taking it back to the whole, when I'm relaying these nutrients, when I'm relaying this sustenance to my neighbors and family and loved ones. But who ate first? The worker bee did. Who sustains their role within that hive? Who is always doing what they can to provide? The worker bees do. With that, I'd like to segue into 10 different ways to help you folks think like a bee. The first of those 10 ways to think like a bee is take responsibility. I am a big believer that everybody is responsible for their life. You have very little that you can control in your life other than what you think and how you feel. If the time's right, you can control what you think and how you feel. But you are responsible for having somewhat of a control over those things. You can't let your mind just run rampant and tell you what to do all the time. And you can't let your heart run rampant and tell you what to do all the time. You have to have control over the way that you are thinking and the way that you are feeling, or you will become someone else or something else's punching bag, or you may spiral into a wicked depression, or you may find yourself on a path that is unfulfilling. All 3 of those scenarios are things that have been happening, that have happened to myself personally, all because I didn't want to take responsibility for how I was feeling or thinking at the time. One instance in particular is when I was not taking responsibility is as a collegiate athlete, somebody who was a collegiate athlete. As somebody who was a collegiate athlete, I got in trouble more than once for smoking marijuana. And that in and of itself is the furthest thing away from thinking like a bee. That's the furthest thing away from taking responsibility. I allowed an external substance to manipulate how I felt about myself and thought about my current experience internally. Something external to me, I want to say demonized the inside of me to a point that I felt compelled to go and use that substance, which I knew was against the rules, and I let my teammates down multiple times. Not easy for me to tell that story. I always get my tail between my legs about that. But at the same time, it does provide some emphasis to the idea of taking responsibility. When you know what is right for yourself, when you are striving for something that is bigger than you, or when you are simply trying to become a better person, you must take responsibility upon the way that you think and you feel. Otherwise, things that are external to you, things that should have no control over you, are going to manipulate you into acting or thinking or feeling a certain way that is not conducive to you becoming the best version of yourself. See, it really is up to you to harness yourself in your heart, in your mind, because they are very powerful places and can lead you to great things if you listen correctly. But you have to take responsibility and be willing to do the uncomfortable work to become responsible enough to live your life in a free way. Number 2 on how to think like a bee is impersonal service. This is one of my favorites. One of my favorite concepts, I should say. Impersonal is a word that's been popping up in my life frequently. Impersonal. What does it mean to be impersonal? It would have been impersonal of me, Trent Balduff, to not have smoked any marijuana when I was in college and on the track team. Okay? It would have been impersonal of me to say, no, I know what is best for me. I know what is best for my community, and I know what is the next step closer to the vision that I'm pursuing. Those things are very important to know what you value, how you can help those around you, and the vision in front of you. Those 3 will keep you away and they will allow you to take responsibility. But impersonal service is what comes next. When you are responsible, you serve impersonally. You keep your ego out of it. You don't let that influence how you think you ought to act or what you ought to do with this person. Oh, I want to make this person happy, or of course, it's about making people happy, but making them happy for what? Is there a return in it for you? Is it a random act of kindness? The impersonal service has to be, or I should rather say, impersonal service gets to be the acts of God. And what I mean by that is that when you are acting impersonally, this is the spirituality coming out in me, if you can't already tell, is that when you are acting impersonally, when you're keeping your ego out of it, which something that changed my life, Dr. Wayne Dyer explained the ego in this way. When you have your ego on, you are edging God out. And when you are acting impersonally without an ego, you are letting God in. And you are allowing that higher power that is within each of us and that is external to us. It's the higher power that aligns stars to teach us and tell us how to act. It will lead us down a path that provides us with a wholesome fulfillment, a happiness, because we are getting to serve. We are getting to not only serve ourselves, make a living while doing so, making people happy while doing so, but we get to serve that higher power. You see, when you take responsibility, you are response-able. And when you are response-able, you serve impersonally. You're able to make that decision of, do I serve for me or do I serve for something that's bigger than me? Do I serve for something that is going to not only change my life, but somebody else's in a positive way? Number 3, I did not put these kind of in order on purpose, but they're kind of coming in order. So the third piece of advice on how to think like a bee is you've got to tap in and tune in. You've got to be feeling right to go and serve. You do have to be feeling good. And why I say tap in and tune in is because me personally, I don't feel as apt to go and conquer my day, to carpe that diem, if I haven't meditated. If I don't take the time to feel that impersonal self, if I don't take the time to think about or contemplate what I pray about, or that higher power within me, I'm not tapped in and I'm not tuned on. I literally feel as if there was a cord hanging out like a tail, if I had a cord, that I'm unplugged from the wall and that I just feel powerless because I am only a human. We are only humans. But what separates us from a monkey or any of the other physical beings is that we have our consciousness. We have a consciousness that we can exacerbate to a degree we don't even know about yet. But the point of that entire journey of getting to know your best self or reaching your potential is starting to tap in and tune on that consciousness. And that's people that think like a bee are always tapped, almost always tapped in and tuned on. They understand that you can't really pour from an empty cup. And before you even go out there, you know you're going to get thirsty. So you might as well fill up that cup. And that is what meditation is. That is what centering yourself in that higher power is. I also say tap in and tune in because of the fact that bees, they can't hear. That's remarkable that these bees who only buzz around, they don't talk to one another. They only buzz around. And the decibel level of hives fluctuate too, but they don't have ears. So how do they communicate? All through their sight, and they feel everything. They communicate through vibration and frequency, which I think is a perfect analogy for human life, because you ever just walk into a room and like off rip, you can see somebody in the back of that room that is just glowing and they look so happy and you almost want to be friends with them. You almost want to go up and talk to them. Or even worse, you walk into a room and you see somebody in the corner that's just kind of got like this dark cloud around them. Ugh. What I'm trying to say is we may have ears. Humans might have ears, but we sure as heck feel our way through life just as much as we can see, hear, all the physical things, see, hear, taste, touch, smell, all of those things that we can observe with our five senses. There is that sixth sense that we humans have where we can feel everything. We can sense auras. We pick up on energy, whether it be subliminal, conscious, or subconscious. The point is that we do pick up on those things. And I've felt in my personal life experience that I have become much happier. I have become much more productive and a more loving person all around the more that I started to tune in, tap in, and listen to the way that I felt, just like the bees do. You see, they know where honey is at because their partners, the other bees in the colony will actually dance and tap their feet. That's what they feel, is they feel the feet tapping, and therefore they follow one another. It's remarkable because when you get somebody who has high energy, when you get somebody who's vibrating really fast and they have a good idea, and then they're off to the races and they're getting stuff done and they're fulfilling their vision, man, oh man, those people feel good to be around. And the bees know that. Us humans need to observe that better. Which leads me right into the next one. Open minds and open hearts. Bees have open minds and open hearts because they have to trust their partners and their neighbors that are in those colonies that are leading them to different nectar sources. They have to love their neighbors and their colony members. Because without all 10,000 of them, which trust me, that's just a starting number. They can get up to 60, 70, 100,000 bees strong in a single hive. But for them, all of those seemingly countless insects to work together as a whole, now that is just remarkable. They have to have open hearts to do that because they understand that we're all in this together. So thinking like a bee requires you to have an open mind and an open heart because you will be open to more life experiences. You will be open to more ideas penetrating the garden of your mind and laying its seed there. When you have an open mind, you are more likely to receive inspiration. And when you have an open heart, it's the same thing. You're more likely to receive inspiration because you know what it feels like to give and to receive. People that think like bees have an open mind and an open heart. They also create boundaries for themselves. Boundaries. This is something that is the craft of an adult, so to speak, because when you're a kid, you don't want to have any boundaries. You just want to have all of the freedom that you can have and go and do as you please when you want to. And don't get us wrong. Us adults like to do that too, kiddos, okay? But at the same time, the boundaries of, all right, you got to be home by this time. You need to be in bed at this time. You need to do X, Y, and Z requirements, these kind of boundaries. As an adult, or somebody who is on their path to self-enlightenment and self-improvement, it's very important that you set boundaries for yourself, that you do have somewhat of a curfew. That way you're just not essentially all of the 7 deadly sins in one, because that's what it is like to have no boundaries. You're a glutton, you're lustful, you're greedy, things of that nature. You have to have a level of contentment and happiness within yourself to understand when enough is enough. Now, honeybees might not be the best example for boundaries for bounty, because they are the only pollinator that will actually hoard all of their food. That's why beekeepers tend to take care of honeybees, because they not only store enough honey for themselves to eat, but they also, like I said, they literally hoard X amount of pounds additional that the beekeeper gets to steal, because they are that productive. They are always moving. They do sleep though, but interestingly enough, there are almost no boundaries. Now, bumblebees are a better example for this boundaries for bounty way of thinking, because bumblebees only collect enough honey to not only sustain themselves, but to have for like the next 24 hours time. But they continue to work. It's not like honeybees where we've got honey for years and we're still going. Like it's just, there are sometimes boundaries are necessary for bounty. In the eyes of a honeybee, there's never enough bounty. But in the eyes of us humans, there is a level of stoicism that we need to acquire. We have to understand that some of these boundaries that we create for ourselves are not for us, but for other people. Because I know of people that are so stressed at their job that if they don't create boundaries with the people that they work with, they'll kill one of them. And we don't want murders on our hands. We don't want people that are short-tempered or anything of that nature. Create boundaries for yourself. There's nothing wrong with saying no to protect your energy, is the bottom line of this statement. And thinking like a bee is protecting your energy, your life, your love, your emotions, all of your resources. Thinking like a bee includes making boundaries to protect yourself from the external world. Because like I said in the beginning, for you to be responsible, you do have to take that responsibility for controlling what is inside. And that is adding boundaries to your life. You are more responsible when you create those boundaries internally, and you are able to tell yourself no, or you're able to redirect your thinking, or you're able to bypass the current immediately accessible reward. And yeah, like I said, bypass that for a more glorious one in the future. Whoops. There we are. And the last 5 bits of information on how to think like a bee are coming at you. Number 1 of these last 5, number 6 technically, is shadow work. Now, those of you who study or observe any sort of the teachings of psychology may or may not have heard the name Carl Jung. And Carl Jung spoke extensively about working on your shadow self. Essentially, when you think of a yin and yang, there's a perfect balance of white, and there's a perfect half of black. Shadow work is delving deep within your mind to discover those shadow parts of yourself, the part of your ego, the part of the mask that you present to your peers or other people, or the pieces of your personality that have been suppressed. Shadow work is where you can absolve addiction. Shadow work is where you can absolve any sort of self-esteem issues. Shadow work is what allows you to become whole. Now, how does shadow work pertain to bees? We're going to go back in reference to the hive itself. You look on the outside and they can be beautifully painted and decorated and set in the most elegant location. Mwah! beautiful trees and flowers in the background of this gorgeous buzzing hive. But you open up that beehive on the inside, and what was it before you shed light into there? It was black. There was darkness. These bees don't see while they are in that hive. They only feel, because it is pitch black in there. And sometimes the best thing that you're going to be able to do for yourself is just close your eyes and sit and observe yourself. Observe yourself from a first person point of view, but also a third person point of view. Not only to be the observer, but to be the one that is being observed. People that think like a bee are not afraid of diving into their dark side and extrapolating the shadows of their life so that light, love may pierce through these dark areas of their life, the way that they think or the way they act. Number 7 is flock wisely. Most people have heard of a swarm, and I horribly, I just chose the wrong word there. It should say swarm wisely, not flock wisely. But anyhow, bees in nature, especially honeybees. I can't speak for many other bees. I have not done that due diligent research, but I can say this for about honeybees is that when a colony of bees are together and the queen is in there with that colony of bees in their hive, all of those bees are addicted, for lack of a better term, to that queen bee's pheromones. And when that queen bee doesn't feel comfortable, when that queen bee doesn't feel as if she has enough room to continue to produce a population, when there's not enough food, if it's too cold, if it's swarm season, which is a real thing, she will actually vacate that hive and try and go find a hole in a tree or another beehive elsewhere to restart that colony. She only takes half of the population with her, though. And the point of thinking like a bee is to swarm wisely, because even though some things may feel uncomfortable, some things may not be exactly where you want it to be, or it's not making you feel the way that you want to, sometimes you really do just need to stick the situation out. That's why I say swarm wisely. You need to be able to take into consideration everything that's going on externally, but also internally. More importantly, internally. And an example to back that up would be a time in my life where I was also in college, go figure. It was a transformative stage in my life, folks, okay? But the point being is that I had come up to a situation where I needed to swarm. I was living in an apartment off campus and working 3 jobs and being a collegiate athlete, all of those things happening at the same time, they can wear a person down. And any of those, so it was school, track, and 3 jobs. Any of those 5 I could have stuck with and made a total success out of. But you can't just pole vault every day, all day. You need to have money to be able to feed yourself. And if you want to pole vault, you got to go to school. So I knew that I could I could swarm away from 2 of those areas and just have 1 job and put more hours into it. But essentially, I weighed the pros and cons of each of the options, of those 5 options, and I picked the 3 that were best for me and swarmed away from the other 2. It is very important for you to be able to know when to fold them and when to hold them. What is it that is going to be your breaking point in any sort of partnership too? Especially as an entrepreneur, you have to know for your own sustainability, what is your breaking point with a partner? At what point would you want to do this solo? Or what point would you want to acquire a different location? How can you think of this in a way or go about this in a way that you've taken everything into consideration? Or you actually got to do that backwards. You do need to take everything into consideration before you do the right thing in most cases. So always swarm wisely. Not only knowing where you're going, but why you're leaving if you do need to leave. Number 8 is survival. And I know I've touched on this quite a bit. I might not spend as much time on this point, but essentially, what are we here to do as human beings other than to serve one another? We are all providing some sort of value to this experience that we get to call human life. And if we're lucky, if we're smart, we'll pick some sort of avenue that we can take that we enjoy, that we genuinely enjoy, that satisfies ourselves financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, things of that nature. Not all of us are that blessed. Some of us, quote unquote, do what we got to do. Right now, if I were to do what I got to do, I would go get a job at a factory so that I could move into the house that I need to renovate. But essentially, we are all here to serve one another. We all bring some sort of value and we have a purpose within that value. Why do we want people to experience the same thing? Why do I want people to sponsor beehives? It's because I know that seeing a beehive and feeling connected to the bees changed my life, and I want to provide that opportunity to other people. Survival is not just about making sure that you get yours. Survival is living to serve. You are getting a different energy, a different return out of your life experience because of your consciousness, your conscious choosing to serve in the way that you are. So I want to advise everybody that is listening that if you're about to swarm, that you swarm wisely and choose something that is more fulfilling to you financially, socially, physically, mentally, emotionally, but most importantly, spiritually. Make sure that it is something that helps fill up your cup. Please, for your sake. Survival is not just doing what we need to do for a healthier today and a healthier tomorrow for ourselves as individuals. Survival is making sure that we are working in a way that somehow puts a smile on somebody's face or saves their day. Another way to think like a bee is to see life in a different light. Now, this one is very interesting to me. And I say that it's important to see life in a different light because bees quite literally see life in a different light. You see, what we're able to observe is only a human capability. There are different spectrums of life, light in life. Bees see on the ultraviolet spectrum. So the way that they see colors, the way that they see the earth and themselves, it's completely contrary to the way that we get to observe colors and motion. And the point of seeing life in a different light is that sometimes when life's got you down or when things aren't going your way, there's that saying that the grass is always greener on the other side and it's always darkest before the dawn. Well, in my opinion, the grass is green on both sides and the sun's always shining. Do your best to see your life in a different light and take a different perspective that hopefully allows you more happiness or more courage. See things in a different light to provide you with some sort of ease on whatever situation it is that you're up against. Always be willing to see things from a different light and know that the only thing that we know as human beings is that we know nothing. I believe that was Seneca, a great philosopher. And I hope I got that quote right. But if not, don't quote me. Last but most certainly not least, one of the most important points of how to think like a bee is to have faith in your neighbor. You see, we've got a different understanding on what it means to think like a bee because we now have the understanding we're the most important person in the world. I'm the most important person in the world. But so are you. And so is he, and so is she, and my cousin, and my aunt, and my aunt's cousin, and my cousin's aunt. Everybody here is the most important person in the world. And although we strive for such independence, and some people have that utmost freedom and independence, we're still all in it together. I don't see anybody building a car from start to finish, like going and getting their own gasoline from oil out of the ground and building their own tire and car just so they say that they can travel. They go to Ford and buy a car. because that's the value that that organization provides. Some of it's convenience, some of it's emotion, how you can provide. You can provide convenience, you can provide good emotion, or you can provide actual sustenance. You can make them feel good, you can fill their belly, or you can make their life easier. Those are the three ways that most folks find themselves in service. And whichever of those avenues that you take, you have to have faith that it's not only going to pan out for you, but that as long as your loved ones, your neighbors, are pursuing their path to personal greatness, that they will also be able to blossom into that person or individual or organization that they want to become. Now, as I've mentioned multiple times throughout this speech, I'm a deeply spiritual person. I observe and practice all of the major world religions, but I found that here in America, it is most easy to relate to Christianity. And two of my favorite Bible verses that I have found that immediately relate to the way that bees live their life and the way that they think are the following. We have Romans 12:5. So in Christ, though many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. That perfectly describes the way that a beehive works. Although there are many, they do form one body. And I want to add a little bit more detail to that. There's that age-old saying that I love dearly. We are human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having human experiences. We are all one. If we are all spiritual beings, we are all connected in ways that we cannot see through the human lens. We do form one body of consciousness, and each of us belong to one another. It is our responsibility to love and care for ourselves in such a way that we may be able to step forth and love and care for our neighbors. And Mark 9:35, whoever wants to be first must place himself last of all and be the servant of all. This one took me a little while to get to understand. If I want to be first, if I want to be the light that God shines a light on, or the individual that God shines a light on, you have to be willing to serve his other children. You have to be willing to serve your neighbor before you get served. There is a continuous give and take, and you will be able to feel in your life when you're giving too much or when you're taking too much. There is that balance. You have to be open to both. You must think like a bee to understand when is it time to serve. The time to serve is always. The fun part about life is getting to pick how you serve. You must be the servant of all. So when it comes to deciding your path, whether you're an entrepreneur or anybody else, when it comes to deciding your path, you must serve. You must understand, I am the most important person in the world. And that without me, without this physical body, without my conscious effort to put in the work, I cannot possibly be happy or be of service to anybody else. I will be a drain on them. You have to go through shadow work to become that better version of yourself, to then go serve others. You have to think like a bee in order to be the best version of yourself. I am now totally open to any questions you folks might have. I'd be happy. I'm an open book. I have no boundaries in terms of verbal conversation. Or at least if I do, they're few and far between. And yeah, I'm open, folks. Does anybody have any questions?
should be able to unmute themselves if they want.
Any questions at all? Maybe not even for me. I've found, they say that mothers know best. And my mom has told me for years that I should be a counselor. And I have always been like the wise owl of my friend group, providing some sort of consolation to my friends in need or any of my friends that felt confusion or things like that. So I really do want to open it up and say that from an unbiased third-party point of view, somebody who is out here impersonal and humble, feel free to ask me any question if you're looking for any sort of guidance, or if you just want me to pray for you or meditate for you. Any of that, I'm more than open to doing or assisting with. Got a taker?
I want to ask. This is Georgianne. I'm the chapter administrator for SPORT.
Patrick, I just want to let you know we're out of here.
One moment, I'm sorry. We have we had some technical difficulties. Just
okay.
Pop their head in. Anyhow, no, I'm sorry. Could you please restate your question?
Sure. It's more of an observation. I know very little about honeybees. I know a whole lot more now that I've listened to you talk about them. Excellent. My cousin has hives. But just the way the division of labor is pretty phenomenal, isn't it? I'm just kind of taken aback at how that all works with the different levels of workers and the ones that eat honey and take care of mama. It's really, really an interesting thing. And I'm glad that you did this for us. And I hope we can hear you some more.
Well, I'm humbled and blessed to be here. I appreciate you allowing me to be here. And I'm glad that you learned a thing or two from this.
I did.
Speech. Awesome. I literally just grazed some of the most basic stuff. So if you really are interested, you should YouTube beekeeping and just sit back for an hour and get your mind blown. Yep. It's a good time.
Do that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Any questions? Going once? Twice?
Oh, go ahead, Logan. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, Trent.
Hey, Logan. What's up, buddy?
Not too much. Just listening to your speech here. It's been wonderful, I will say. Now, you said that you do enjoy honey, was a thing I noticed. And I was wondering, like, I know it's a pretty sweet thing, but it's still pretty good for you, right? Like, I know that's more about the early part of the topic, but that was one kind of, it's still really good for you though, right? Like the honey that they produce, the fruit of their labor is like the Egyptians thought it was like amazing even, like I think that's a pretty interesting staple, and you yourself like it. Did you think that kind of pulled you to this bee concept?
I'm about to take the folks that are listening on a little trip down memory lane. So Logan, the gentleman that just was asking about my interest in honey, we've been best friends since we were the age of 13. And his grandfather was a beekeeper in our hometown. And he and I used to go out to his grandpa's honey hut and just gorge ourselves on honeycomb and things of that. So like with zero boundaries, right? So we need boundaries for bounty. Logan and I had no boundaries. We would eat that honey until we threw up. And we just had a blast doing it. And we still talk about those stories that we made for each other to this day, 12 years later. Honey was most certainly something that drew me towards beekeeping. Not only because of the way that it tasted, but because of the way that it's made. It's remarkable. For those of you who do not know, honey is just bee puke. I hate to break it to you, but what they actually do is they get the nectar from the bottom of these flowers while they're pollinating them, which pollination is essentially when they visit a flower, these pollen grains stick to their butts and thighs while they're getting the nectar from that plant. They go to another plant, pick up more nectar, but the grains of pollen went from one flower to the next, which allows for the reproduction of that flowering plant. Now, once they have a belly full of nectar, they literally don't have the exact or the right amount of enzymes in their stomach to digest it into the viscosity that we know honey as, the thickness that we know honey as. So they throw it up into each other's mouths about 7 times until it's ready to store for later. I hope that didn't gross anybody out. So it's not only my history with honey, how amazing it tastes, the fact that I formed friendships around it, how it's made, but it's also how much you can do with it, culinarily speaking. And one of your original questions was like, it's so sweet, but it's still good for you, right? Honey is the most pure form of sugar that you can possibly have. That white granulated stuff that you mix into brownies or anything that else that is natural, like for cooking, that processed sugar is heavily and highly correlated to the production of cancer cells in bodies, in human bodies. The honey is the most pure form of natural, like the most pure form of sugar that you can come across, partially because it's already been digested for us. It's easier for us to digest the sugars. So it's like it's literally almost like immediate energy for us. It's pretty remarkable, the process that, like the thought that it came from the flower and ends up in a human stomach is pretty cool. But to your point about the Egyptians being amazed by honey, that they actually kind of coined the phrase, the nectar of the gods. And honey in and of itself, to me, is the nectar of the gods, because how can you get something so sweet and so succulent from a product of God, such as a flower? There is actual divinity in flowers, if you ask me. The fact that the bees, which is also a sacred divine little being, goes in and extrapolates that sweetness in excess to the point that we can also forage upon these, like that sweetness too, is just remarkable. There is some sort of higher power or higher instinct about these bees. Let's just say it like this: bees, they're thinking like bees. They follow their higher power. Definitely. They just go and they do what their instinct tells them to do, which is a beautiful thing. I hope that answered your question, buddy. And I hope that that informed other people about just honeybees in general.
What are these murder hornets?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's going on with those?
So Pat, who is here in the studio with me, just asked about murder hornets. Me personally, I have no experience with murder hornets. From what I do know, that they are on the West Coast, upper, like towards Oregon, Washington. Don't quote me on that. You know, 'cause I personally, I don't believe stuff until I see it nowadays, just knowing how many lies are spread on the internet. At the same time, I have not been able to find any scholarly research-based articles about murder hornets. I do know that they, from what I've seen in news articles, that they are rather deadly and can completely devastate and wipe out a colony of bees. And what I'm doing as an entrepreneur for the sustainability of not only my business, but bees themselves, is I am 3D printing murder hornet excluders that go at the entrance of beehives. And they're like little slots that are just big enough for regular honeybees to get through. But murder hornets are like ginormous, scary looking insects. They're too big to make it through.
That's awesome.
And actually get in and start ravishing and killing these honeybees. So it's they are going to be a pest, but I would be amazed if murder hornets were more of a pest than varroa mite. Varroa mite is the mite that is responsible for the colony collapse disorder, which is why we have the Save the Bees movement. It's because of those little guys. Those varroa mite actually, does anybody want to know about varroa mite? I could go on for another couple minutes. Very informational, not as dramatic comparing, not as dramatic in comparison like the rest of my speech, but I do have some facts about varroa mite. If anybody's interested,
Yeah.
why not? So varroa mite actually feed off of the fat body of the bees. When a varroa mite attaches itself to the abdomen of a bee, mostly in baby bees, because the baby bees, the larvae actually are nothing but a fat body, and they can just sit there and eat the whole larva and get away scotch-free. Other than that, though, you've got to imagine this is what it's like for a honeybee when they've got a varroa mite stuck to them. You ever just have like, you're coming down off of a flu or off of the flu or coming down off of having a cold and you just don't feel 100%, you really don't want to go to work, you don't want to talk to people, you don't have much of an appetite, you're not even that thirsty, you just kind of feel like bleh. That's what it's like for a honeybee, because the fat body is actually their energy storage. That's what they fuel their flight with. Literally, they're fueling it with honey, yes, but there are also many other proteins and fats in their diet. But what fuels their flight is the fat body, and varroa mites extrapolate that fat from the bee themselves, which leads to lazy workers. Lazy workers leads to shortage of food. Shortage of food leads to a complete decimation of the entire population within a few days' time. Not only that, one varroa mite is capable of producing 800 other varroa mites through their breeding process. So you can see how it could be start to easily overrun an entire colony of bees. They are actually Satan. Varroa mites are not fun. They're a part of what we got to deal with, though. It's all good.
If someone wanted to sponsor a hive, what do they got to do?
That is an excellent question. So, folks, I did not advertise for myself like I thought I was going to via this presentation. Really, I just wanted you to have a better understanding of a different perspective on life. But if you find yourself compelled in any way, shape, or form to support what I do as an entrepreneur, if you want to support community development, if you want to support saving the bees, you can log on to www.haveahive.org. That's haveahive.org. And then you can go to the Create Colonies page. And from that Create Colonies page, you will see 6 different opportunities and ways in which you can contribute to our causes. You don't really want to miss out on being some of the first sponsors on the Uber of beekeeping. I'll tell you that much. All of our sponsors who do sponsor a beehive, beekeeper, or a hive park, they are given an incentive package every year, which is chock full of all natural goods from the beehives that you made possible. So you get bars of beeswax soap, you get all natural honey, things of that nature. You are literally one step away from being a beekeeper. But the best part is that you help beekeepers too, because of the technology that we've developed. I'm excited about it. I've actually got a conference call tomorrow afternoon, with a smart beehive technology company that's in Toronto, Canada. And what we are looking to partner with them, we already get the beekeepers firsthand experience, what they can see in our app. We want to partner our technologies so that we are not only able to track what the beekeeper can see, but we're also able to get an understanding of the humidity within the hive, the temperature, the decibel level within the hive, and the overall weight of the colony as well. These 4 things are very indicative of swarming, when it might swarm, or whether or not there are mites within the hive and things of that nature. It also helps beekeepers understand when to harvest. It's very useful technology. And if we're able to combine these 2 partnerships, if we're able to marry these 2 technologies together, we'll be able to have a map that pulls up all of the sponsored beehives and the sponsored beekeepers. One last, if there are any entrepreneurs left on this conference call, I want to say thank you for sticking it out. I'm glad that you didn't have 10,000 other things to do tonight, like most entrepreneurs do, and that you sat down here with us. I hope that you learned something about this. And my only piece of advice as an entrepreneur is that it's not about the destination. It is always about the journey. And you hear this so many times, time in and time out. But if you are not consciously allowing yourself to be happy and enjoy the entire process that leads you to that $1 million deal, or getting to the place where you can open up a storefront, if you're not happy on the way there, getting it is not going to be as fulfilling as you'd like it to be. It's just going to be to have it. It's a fun game being an entrepreneur. And I encourage everybody to do so with their own life. It doesn't even have to be with a business, but make a vision for yourself and go about that pathway to bring that vision to enlightenment and make it manifest. Every entrepreneur in here, you're in it for the long haul, or I would encourage you to be in it for the long haul. You've got a long life ahead of you. So make sure that in your service, you're not only having fun, but you genuinely enjoy like what you do and how you do it. You've got to have the pride in how you do it too. Definitely. Do we have any other questions?
I do. One more. Can you talk about Manuka honey and what it is? And is that something that comes from regular hives, or is that the medicinal honey? Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, I'm not terribly versed on this type of honey, this strain of honey. What I do understand about Manuka honey is that it is from bees in Australia. There is either a very special species of honeybee or a very special species of flower in which they visit to obtain that Manuka honey. But I have heard that even topically, putting it on your skin, but also ingesting it is medicinal in many ways. I wish that I could speak more on it from firsthand experience, but I don't even have secondhand experience to tell you more about. I've tried it before, but I'm a skeptic in the sense that it may or may not be real. I'd like to think that the Manuka honey that I had was real. It was delicious. I don't know much about Manuka honey, but I do know a bit about what's called Melipona honey. And this might knock your socks off. There's a very special species of honeybee that are almost microscopic. They're maybe not microscopic, but they're extraordinarily tiny in comparison to the domesticated honeybees that we see in our backyards here today. Now, what's interesting about Melipona honeybees is that they are the only bee species that are able to pollinate vanilla flowers. And when the nectar from these vanilla flowers has a very sweet aromatic sense about it, but the taste of it is it's unbelievable. They sell this thing. They sell like 4 ounces of this for $60. This Melipona honey. It's because it's such a highly specified, unique bee and flower species to make that kind of honey. And you can find Melipona flowers in Mexico. I know they're elsewhere in the world, but I'm having a bit of a brain fart if I'm being honest.
Thank
So
you.
again, I'm sorry I couldn't speak on Manuka, but
No,
I hope
it's okay.
Melipona helps.
It's all very interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments, prayer requests, insults? I'm open to all of them. All righty. Well, folks, again, I cannot thank you enough for coming in and tuning in tonight. I'm trying to flip the slide to the thank you slide. Is that off the
Is it
iPad?
gonna work now?
Hey, there it is. Yeah, earlier today I had edited this slide in particular so that it included my contact information. I will just real quick provide you folks with my email if anybody does have ideas for individuals or organizations for me to network with, anything of that nature. But you can email me at Trent@haveahive.org. So it's Trent@haveahive.org. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. Thank you again, folks.
Yeah, thank you, Trent.
Namaste.
All right, I put his email into chat for everyone as well.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, folks. Think like a bee.